Hi everyone! Today we're talking about the ISTJ personality type in combination with different Enneagram types that often or commonly occur in combination with the ISTJ. These are Enneagram 1, Enneagram 5 and Enneagram 6. And I'm also going to briefly mention Enneagram 3 and Enneagram 8. So, all about that in the next few minutes. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. So, I was mentioning that for the ISTJ personality, the most common pairings are Enneagram 1, Enneagram 5, and Enneagram 6. So let's start with Enneagram 1. I would say that Enneagram 1 in general is often associated with types that are both introverted and judges. Although it's not necessarily the case, it can definitely be found in other types as well. But ISTJ is one of the types where it commonly occurs. And I would say that whenever we have this combination, we will have a pretty stereotypical ISTJ or an ISTJ that is less likely to mistype as something else. Because a lot of the characteristics of Enneagram 1 have a pretty big overlap with traits that we generally associate with the ISTJ. So in the case of someone who's an ISTJ and a 1, we will have a tendency to see quite a lot of introversion. I would say that it's one of the most introverted types of ISTJ, much more introverted than other Enneagram pairings like Enneagram 8 or Enneagram 3, even more introverted than Enneagram 6. It will also be a kind of ISTJ that seems to show more of a perfectionistic tendency, because Enneagram 1 is called the perfectionist or the reformer, which means that this person will place a lot of value on doing things properly, on getting it right, on doing things in the best way possible. Because Enneagram 1 is part of the gut triad or the instinctual triad, which means that there is a strong inner desire to control things in order to make sure that autonomy is not lost. So this is something that the types that are all part of the gut triad have in common. I want to be in control because I don't want to lose my autonomy, because that will make me feel rage. So an ISTJ Enneagram 1 will tend to be a bit more nitpicky, a bit more attentive to details, even though this is something we do see quite often in ISTJs. I would say that an Enneagram 1 ISTJ has this trait in an even more pronounced fashion. Being attentive to details, wanting to do things thoroughly, and expecting the same from other people. Sometimes having very, very high standards for themselves and for others as well. Now, moving on to the next one, ISTJ and Enneagram 5. As I think I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, Enneagram 5 is a type that is oftenly associated with MBTI types that are both introverted and thinkers. It tends to be more common for INTP and ISTP, but INTJ and ISTJ are also here. Again, this kind of ISTJ will be quite introverted because Enneagram 5 is considered to be one of the most introverted types out of all of the 9 Enneagram types. However, in this case, the motivation will be quite different. So an ISTJ Enneagram 5 will be part of the thinking triad. Like I mentioned before in other videos, Enneagram 5, Enneagram 6, and Enneagram 7 are all part of the thinking triad. So what does this mean? In this case, it means that all of these types are looking for really trying to escape the feeling of I'm not safe by dealing with creating safety for themselves. And Enneagram 5 will always try to create safety and security by focusing on the things that represent their intellectual pillars in a way. They want to be competent, they want to be useful, they want to be very good at what they're doing. And this is often manifested at a very intellectual level. That's not to say that an Enneagram 5 individual cannot have a practical job or cannot be good at practical things, but the pressure that they put on themselves is very much related to wanting to be intellectually very knowledgeable, very competent, very useful. And because of that, they might spend even more time as compared to other Enneagram types doing research and investigating things. And again, if you see someone doing research, it doesn't mean they're an Enneagram 5. Of course not. But if we look at the motivation behind it, if someone does a lot of research because they're trying to overcompensate for their fear of being incompetent, and this is a very common theme in their lives, it's very likely that they do have, Enneagram 5 either as a main type or somewhere in their tri-type. So the ISTJ 5 might sometimes mistype as an intuitive type because of the fact that some of these traits, some of the descriptions of Enneagram 5 might make one believe that, being intellectual means being an intuitive, which is not true. But it can explain why sometimes mistypes occur here. ISTJ and Enneagram 6. Now, this one again is quite common because Enneagram 6 does tend to correlate quite a lot with introverted sensing, although it's not necessarily the case. Like, I know NJ types who are Enneagram 6. I also know SP types who are Enneagram 6. And I even know, I think, 1 or 2 NP types who are in this category as well. So it's quite widely spread, Enneagram 6. However, I would say that this one is slightly more extroverted than ISTJ Enneagram 5 and ISTJ Enneagram 1. It's still not a very extroverted type, obviously, but it will show a bit more of a tendency to want to meet other people to kind of deal with problems. Because Enneagram 6 is a compliant type. It's also a thinking type like type 5, but it's also a compliant type, which means that it will often look for ways to help other people, to meet with other people in order to deal with problems. Enneagram 1 is in this category as well, but I would say that 6 does this in a bit more of an obvious fashion. It wants to kind of create this connection with other people to see what they can do for others, how they can be useful for others, what is it that they can support others with so that they are perceived as a reliable person, as a loyal person. And this is usually very important for Enneagram 6. Also, Enneagram 6 is an anxiety type, so again, the message here is that I'm trying to stay safe because I really want to get rid of anxiety. This is the feeling that is causing me the most difficulty. And yeah, basically something that Enneagram 6 often struggles with is the need to find safety outside of themselves, as if they need to place safety and security based on what other people do, or based on belief systems, or based on job security or relationships and things like that. Okay, so these are, I would say, in my opinion, usually the most common combinations between ISTJ and Enneagram. However, types 3 and 8 can also occur. I actually know ISTJs who are 3 and ISTJs who are 8. The ISTJ 3 will appear to be more extroverted, and so will the ISTJ 8, at least in a social sense. They will be a bit more outspoken. Their extroverted thinking function will be a bit more obvious. And out of all of the types, ISTJ 3 might actually appear to be one of the most image conscious of the ISTJs. They will want to impress, they will want to be outstanding in their work, in whatever they do. This will be extremely important to them. And you will find them having this charismatic vibe that is a bit more obvious than in other types of ISTJ. And now for the ISTJ 8, they will sometimes mistype as ESTJ or ENTJ because, again, the extroverted thinking tendencies will be a bit more obvious. A lot of type 8s are indeed TE types, but of course it doesn't always have to be like this. ESFPs and ESTPs and ENTPs and ENFPs can also be Enneagram 8. So it's not like it's a clear-cut rule. However, because of this tendency, the ISTJ might actually look a bit more like an ESTJ because of the obvious nature of their extroverted thinking. So yeah, these are my thoughts on the most common pairings, common associations between ISTJ and Enneagram. Like I said before, I do believe that it's possible to have any combination between MBTI and Enneagram, but I do believe that some are very likely, some are moderately likely, whereas some are really, really unlikely and very rarely occur, more so of an exception. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Thanks a lot for being with me. If you're an ISTJ, please feel free to share what your Enneagram type is as well. I'm curious to see what kind of combinations occur in this community as well. And as always, thank you for being with me. See you next time with another video on typology.